Ooby-doo, it's everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. And today we're going to look at two lenses. One, this isn't vintage, but it's a classic. Canon lens EF 24mm 1 to 2.8. This is an autofocus lens. If I have it in manual focus, which I'll explain in a minute. It's on the Velo LAE 5E-CEF, which is auto lens adapter Canon EF EFS lens to Sony E mount. Now this is very cheap adapter. It only costs $100. And well, you know what? None of the autofocus works. All the lenses I got, there are two lenses that do work, but it hunts a lot. It's going to be in bright light. So this particular lens, see, if I put it in autofocus, you could turn the ring, but the scale won't move. But if you put it in manual focus, then you can focus. And it's like using a manual focus lens. I use this A5000. I used a live view magnifier, and then I can focus precisely. So what does this do? What does this do? Well, it activates the aperture, and it puts the EXIF data of the lens into the JPEG comment section. I could use aperture priority or shutter priority mode. I like aperture priority, so I set the shutter speed with the dial, the thumb dial, and then the camera picks the proper shutter speed, so that's great. Or conversely, I could go to shutter priority mode, set the shutter, and this thing, the camera would pick the aperture. So this is a Canon EF lens, and it works on a Sony body really good. So all right, for $100, at least I could use my collection of Canon glass. I could chuck on any of my Sony bodies, and that's good to go. That's nice to know. That's really good. Now, this lens, I bought this lens 15 years ago, so it's not vintage, but it's a classic. It's still in production. So it's a 24mm 1 to 2.8. And I went to the same show, which is a car show in Bergen County. It cost $5 to get in. It was at a train station, and there must have been 300 cars there. This is a totally manual lens, right? And what is this? This is a Asahi Optical Company, lens made in Japan, Super TAKUMAR 3.5 to 24. It's on the photodiox adapter for screw mount. Screw mount sucks, doesn't it? See this little flange here? There's a little flange there, and it engages this pin. So when you screw it on, that pin gets retracted, pushed in, and that makes your lens a stop-down lens. So this thing really doesn't do anything, right, in this case. So basically I like to use F8. I leave on F8. I'm in manual mode, and I set the shutter, and then I go with it. That's all. And then you focus. Let's see. This thing focuses down to 0.8 feet or 2.5 meters. What about this bad boy? 0.25 meters, 0.8 feet. How about that? Exactly the same. So this lens has to be made in the 60s, where this lens was probably made in the 90s or something. Here, look at this. That's a pretty big element, but it's not very curved. It's a very shallow convex, whereas if you look at this element, it's highly convex. They're both the same F number. They're both the same focal length. This one stops on the f16. I forget. I think this one stops on the f22. But I'll have some link to specs into this. So I went to this car show in WALDWICK. The WALDWICK train station is sponsored by the VFW or something about veterans. And like I said, it cost $5 to get in. I got there at 9 o'clock because they said it was going to open at 9:30. But apparently people were pulling in at 7:30, like the people who had their show cars there. And when I got there, there wasn't too much of a crowd. There's a lot of easy parking. And I went in, and the crowd was sparse, and I took a bunch of pictures with one camera. And then it starts to get crowded. it started to get really crowded. I mean, like crowded. So it's hard to take pictures without people getting in the way. So, and it was starting to get hot, and I had a hat on and my brains were baking, so I had to go. So I like to get there early, and as the day gets hot, I have to skedaddle, especially when the crowds start getting crowded. The train station, the trains ran every 20 minutes. So I took a couple of videos of the trains. I'm going to append it to the end, I guess I should do that. And a good time was had by all. You know, mom, pop, buddy and sis, senior citizens, groups of gals or guys or couples. Everyone was there making the scene. And it was pretty cool. I really liked it. And it was an excellent photo op to check these lenses out. And what can I say? This lens, which was made in the 60s, and I'm doing this in 2024, so you figure that's 40 plus 20. This is like 60 years old. This is 15 years old. Look at this lens is a little bit bigger, right? A little bit longer. But of course, it's more modern. It's got more features. I could slap this on any Canon EOS and go all automatic if I wanted to. But all I want to do is compare the quality. And it compared favorably. Absolutely. Now, believe it or not, I paid almost the same amount for this lens as I did for that lens. This lens is all metal, or this is all mostly plastic. The optics are really, really good. They're the same F number. But of course, I've shown at f8 in the sun, and that's what, let's face it, 90% of your picture is going to be at f8 in the sun. And what's the bottom dollar? Well, these lenses, either one would suit you. If you're a Canon guy, you go get the Canon. If you want to be modern with all the assists like autofocus, and you put it in auto mode and it picks the aperture and shutter speed for you, or you could go old school and do everything manually with this. I'm seeing this more and more, that the older lenses are just as good as the modern lenses. Virtually indistinguishable. Center sharpness identical. Almost the same corner sharpness. Oh, both these lenses are full frame lenses. You put them on a full frame camera and take advantage of that. So in a crop center, you expect everything to be ideal. I didn't notice any distortion, like barrel or pincushion. And they're wide, but they're not super wide. So it's not like you see like a lot of distortion of perspective where, lines meet at infinity and stuff like that. There's really nice lenses. And like I always say, if you want to buy just one vintage lens because you want to dip your toe into it, you can't beat this. Not at all. But I'm not saying anything bad about this because I've shot a lot with this lens, and it's a nice lens. No doubt about it. And they're fast. They're 2.8. If you got a zoom, maybe a 24 millimeter, say you got a 17 to a 5.6, maybe at 24 millimeter, it's already at f4 anyway. So you could gain a useful stop and a half under low light conditions with these lenses. So as before, this is the same intro for both of them. So we're going to look at this one first, the Canon, and then the second video will be about this lens. Now remember, these are the Sony a5000, they're 20 megapixel, and we're going to see a resized frame of 16 by 9, and then we're going to pixel peep at 1920 by 1080. And you tell me. Now, like I always say, you're a Canon guy, you look at this and say, yeah, Canon's great, or maybe you're a Pentax guy, you just look at this one and say, Pentax great, you won't look at the other. But there are going to be people who won't know which one to get. And, it depends on your budget. You could shop around, probably get these cheaper if they're in a low-righty condition. And you can certainly pick these up used for, 30 to 40% off list price in really nice condition. So you got to play it like that. That's the way you got to do it. So let's jump right into some pictures, shall we? So I walk into this car show, and what I did is I walked all the way down to the end of the parking lot, and I start to walk back. And there's this two-tone red and white car, which I thought was really cool, and I really liked it. This is a more modern car. That's a stock color. I've seen that color green. Here's there's people specialize in these wrecks, apparently. Now, is he going to sell it for someone to refurbish, or is he going to just you know, preserve it as it is, as a rust bucket. There are people that do that apparently. But still, it was an interesting study, photographic study. Here's a door, a pitted chrome door handle, and I thought that was cool. Vets. Man, you gotta be rich to have a vet. They're like $100,000. So here's the juxtaposition between the ultra modern and slick and an old piece of junk. And then here's a custom rod. This is the Super TAKUMAR M42 24mm f3.5 on a Sony A or Alpha 5000, or technically it's the ILCE 5000. And you know, it's a nice lens. It's an old lens. It's, oh, I don't know, 40 or 50 years old. And it holds its own against modern lenses like the Canon EF 24mm f2.8, which I took to the same show, and there's a companion video about that. The only thing I noticed was that it seemed to be a little less contrasty, and it was prone to flare at certain angles. Since I took this set of pictures first early in the morning, and the sun was a little bit lower, there were a couple of shots where the sun was just able to creep into that critical angle and throw some flare around. Now, car shows and cars, they're all full of details and colors and angles and everything, which is perfect for, you know, trying out a lens to see how good it is. And of course, I set it at f8 and left it at f8. I was in manual mode. It was a dumb adapter, but it wasn't stupid. It worked really well. Had infinity focus, the Photodiox Pro, M42, the Sony E mount. Highly recommend it. They used to be cheap, but they're getting expensive. And I just blasted away. You know, it's a lot of nice cars there. A lot of cherry cars. Wow, there are some nice cars there. This is a custom job. I think I seen this car many years ago somewhere else. And then you always get like these black, you know, coupes or coupes or whatever you want to call them. This looks like it was a four-door, but still a nice car. Really nice car. A lot of really nice cars there. And the Super TAKUMAR is a really nice lens. I'm a Canon guy, but I recognize that Pentax makes a lot of good lenses, and this is one of them. Now, I got mine in excellent condition, and it was a little pricey. Here's some flare for you. How about that? I didn't see that with the Canon EOS, the more modern lens, because it was multi-coated, and the TAKUMAR was probably only single-coated, without a doubt. But it held its own, except for those two instances where it had flare. It held its own, and it was really good. A really nice lens. Takes really excellent pictures. Highly recommend it. Of course, it's interesting. I used Canon EF 24mm f2.8, would probably cost as much as this old vintage lens. But, you know, it's got a look, a very interesting look, without a doubt. You know, on these modern mirrorless cameras, you can't go wrong. I love these interiors. I can't believe it. Now, this is all mushy, sort of like vinyl, and they all like this melted over the years. See, this train looks pretty straight. I don't see any weird complex distortion. Here's another view of the buildings on the left. I don't see any complex distortion like I saw in the Canon lens. But Canon lenses, they're noted for their complex distortion, whereas the Pentax, they control their distortion really well. Nice lens. It's a telephoto lens too. I mean, that means you can take a picture of something on a high megapixel camera and zoom up on an area of interest and still have a well-defined image without it breaking up on you. The WALDWICK Community Center car show. Now here's a classic vet, huh? Chevrolet. Here's a more modern vet. You can see the evolution of how the vets, their style change. This is some sort of Plymouth or something, I think. My old man had a Plymouth, a 49 Plymouth Coupe. I remember the first time he took up to 70 miles an hour, I freaked out. I said, Dad, slow down. But then after you slowed down 50 miles an hour, it seemed like you were going backwards. And that's how you get your need for speed. So it was a cool show, a really nice show with a lot of nice cars and a lot of photo ops. And the lighting was very stable in as much as there were no clouds, except if you stepped into the shade, there was some shade on the side, but mostly in the parking lot it was direct sunlight. So the bottom dollar is get yourself a Super Takumar M42 24mm f3.5. You'll be glad you did.